The moment I realized something was wrong wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no argument, just a quiet notification on my phone while I was standing in line at a grocery store, holding a basket with instant noodles and eggs, doing the kind of mental math you do when you're trying not to overdraft. My phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time. 3 alerts from my credit card app, all within 30 seconds. Pending charges, foreign currency, cities I had never been to, and, frankly, couldn't afford to even Google without feeling stressed. I'm Nathan, 29 years old, and for most of my life I've played the role of the reliable one in my family. Not the successful one, not the impressive one, just the dependable background character who pays his bills, shows up on time, and doesn't rock the boat. I've been independent since I was 18, worked my way through school, moved into a small apartment I could actually afford, and built my life carefully because I had to. No safety net. No bailouts. If I messed up, it was on me. My younger brother, Eric, had a very different experience growing up. He's 24 now, and if I had to describe his role in the family, it would be center of gravity. Everything bends toward him. His moods, his plans, his problems. If something went wrong in Eric's life, it became a family emergency. If something went wrong in mine, it was a lesson I was supposed to learn quietly. That dynamic didn't start recently. It's been there as long as I can remember. Eric forgot his homework in high school. My parents drove it to school. I forgot my lunch money. You'll survive. Eric dropped out of college twice. They blamed the professors. I took on extra shifts to cover rent after a roommate bailed. That's adulthood. So when I saw those charges, my first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. Then a very specific, cold feeling in my stomach. The charges were airline tickets. International. Round trip. Hotels in Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Train passes. Tour packages. The total climbed with every refresh. By the time I stepped out of the store and sat in my car, it was just under $18,000. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone right away. I just sat there with the engine off, phone in my hand, staring at the screen like it might blink and say, just kidding. My credit card limit wasn't even that high, which meant something else had happened. Someone had requested temporary increases. Someone had planned this. The name on the booking confirmations wasn't mine. It was Eric's. And my parents' email address was listed as the contact. I drove home in a fog. Every red light felt longer than usual. My brain kept cycling through the same questions. How did they get my card details? Why didn't anyone ask me? How long had this been planned? But under all of that was a deeper, quieter thought that hurt more than the rest. Of course it was them. Of course it was for him. When I got home, I didn't unpack groceries. I didn't eat. I sat at my kitchen table and pulled up my bank statements, email, credit report. That's when I noticed the smaller things. A test charge from a travel site 2 weeks earlier that I'd missed because it was only a few dollars. A notification about a credit limit increase request approved 3 days ago. I hadn't requested it. I hadn't even seen it. Then it clicked. A year ago, my mom asked me for my credit card details just in case. She said it was for emergencies, like if something happened to them and they needed to book a flight quickly. I hesitated, but she framed it the way she always did, half joking, half wounded. We raised you. You don't trust us. So I gave it to her, with the condition that she'd never use it without asking. She laughed and said she wouldn't dream of it. Apparently, she dreamed of it very clearly. I called my parents' house. My dad answered, cheerful, like it was a Sunday afternoon and not the day my financial stability cracked in half. I asked him, calmly, if they had used my credit card. There was a pause. Not a confused pause. Not a surprised one. A calculating pause. Oh, he said finally, like he'd just remembered something trivial. That must be the travel bookings. I asked what travel bookings. For Eric, my mom's voice cut in from the background. I could hear her walking closer to the phone. It's his graduation gift. Well, delayed graduation gift. You know how hard things have been for him. Hard for him. That phrase again. I asked why my card was used. Another pause. This one longer. Well, my mom said, you have good credit. And you're responsible. We knew it wouldn't be an issue. I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my fingers hurt. I asked why no one told me. We were going to, she said quickly. Too quickly. We just didn't want to stress you out before it was finalized. I laughed once, short and sharp, before I could stop myself. I asked how they planned on paying it back. Oh, Nathan, she sighed, like I was being dramatic. We'll figure it out. You don't need the money right now, do you? You're always so careful. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not explosively, quietly, like a door closing. I told them I needed time to think and hung up before they could keep talking. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Messages from my mom, from my dad. Then, 10 minutes later, from Eric himself. He didn't say thank you. He sent a picture. It was a screenshot of his itinerary. First-class seats circled in red. A caption underneath. Europe, baby. Finally, I stared at that message for a long time. At the casual confidence. The assumption. The complete absence of concern for the fact that this was my name on the debt, my credit on the line, my problem if anything went wrong. He didn't ask if I was okay with it. He didn't acknowledge that it wasn't his card. He just assumed, like everyone else in my family always had, that I'd absorb it. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed every moment over the years where I'd been expected to give, to adjust, to be the reasonable one so no one else had to be. I thought about rent, emergencies, the future plans I'd been slowly saving for. And I thought about what would happen if I did nothing. If I let it slide. If I became the quiet accomplice to my own financial sabotage. The next morning, I opened my credit card app again. The charges were no longer pending. They were posted. I sat there, phone in hand, heart steady in a way that surprised me. I realized something important in that moment. If I confronted them again, it would turn into negotiations, guilt, promises that would dissolve the moment the trip was over. I would be made the villain for even questioning it. So I didn't confront them. I tapped the number on the back of my card and listened as it rang, my finger hovering over the screen, knowing that once I said the words out loud, there would be no pretending this was just a misunderstanding. The representative picked up, cheerful and professional, and asked how they could help. I took a breath, looked at the total one last time, and said, "Hi. I need to report several charges on my account that I did not authorize." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then she asked me to confirm the transactions. As I started reading them out, one by one, I felt my phone vibrate again on the table. A new message coming in, this time from my mom. "I hope you're not making this a big deal. We need you to be mature about this." I didn't open it, because at that exact moment, the representative said, very clearly, "Sir, I'm flagging this as potential fraud," and asked if anyone else had access to my card details. I opened my mouth to answer, and that's when my dad's name lit up on my screen, calling me for the third time that morning. I let my dad's call ring out while I stayed on the line with the credit card company. My hands were steady, which honestly scared me more than if I'd been shaking. The representative asked a few more questions, calm and methodical, and I answered them just as calmly. Yes, I recognized the merchant names. No, I had not authorized the purchases. Yes, someone else had access to my card details. Family member. Yes, I understood the implications. No, I had not given permission for this specific use. She told me the account would be temporarily frozen while they investigated. She explained the next steps, the paperwork, the timeline. I listened, thanked her, and hung up. The moment the call ended, my phone exploded. Missed calls stacked on top of each other. My mom, my dad, Eric. A group chat I hadn't used in years suddenly lit up with messages. I didn't respond right away. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the wall, feeling like I'd stepped off something tall and was still waiting to hit the ground. The first text I opened was from my mom. "What did you do?" No greeting. No concern. Just that. Then my dad. "Call me now. This is not okay." Eric's message came a few seconds later. "Dude, the airline just emailed me. Something's wrong with the tickets. Fix it. Fix it." Like I'd accidentally unplugged the Wi-Fi. I finally typed back to my parents that we needed to talk later and put my phone face down. I went to work, somehow got through the day, and tried to focus on spreadsheets and emails while my personal life quietly detonated in my pocket. By lunchtime, my manager pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay because I looked distracted. I lied and said I hadn't slept well. By the time I got home that evening, my parents were already there. They didn't knock. They used the spare key I'd given them years ago, back when I still thought boundaries were rude. I opened my apartment door to find my mom pacing the living room and my dad standing with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Eric wasn't there, which I noticed immediately. He rarely confronted anything directly if he could let my parents do it for him. My mom started talking the second she saw me. No hello. No asking how I was. "What were you thinking?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I set my bag down slowly and asked them to sit. They didn't. My dad stepped forward. The bank called us. They said the charges are being investigated as fraud. Do you realize how serious that is? They asked us questions, Nathan. Questions. I looked at him and said, evenly. They asked me questions too. Because it's my card. My mom threw her hands up. We told you we'd pay it back. I asked when. She opened her mouth, then closed it. That's not the point. No. I said, that is exactly the point. That's when the tone shifted. The concern drained out of the room and was replaced by something colder. My dad's voice hardened. You didn't have to go this far. You could have talked to us. I did talk to you, I said. You told me it wasn't a big deal. My mom shook her head like I was a stubborn child. We raised you better than this. Reporting your own family? Over money. I felt something snap then. Not loud. Just final. I told her it wasn't about money. It was about trust. About permission. About the fact that they had planned an entire international trip using my credit without so much as a text. For Eric, she shot back. It's not like it was for strangers. That sentence hung in the air. For Eric. As if that explained everything. I asked them if they would have done the same thing to his credit card for me. Neither of them answered. Instead, my dad said, "You're always keeping score." That hurt more than I expected. Because in their minds, this wasn't theft. It was redistribution. I had something. Eric wanted something. They'd simply moved resources around. My mom stepped closer and lowered her voice, the way she used to when she wanted me to feel guilty. You've always been independent. Strong. We didn't think you'd mind helping your brother. Helping implies choice. I pointed that out. She sighed, exasperated. You're being dramatic. This is going to ruin things for Eric. The trip is in 2 weeks. He's already told people. He's been looking forward to this for months. Months. That word echoed in my head. Months of planning. Months of booking. Months where no one thought to mention that my financial future was being quietly leveraged behind my back. My dad said, "You need to call the bank back and clear this up." I asked what that would look like. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding," he said. "That you gave permission." I stared at him. "So you want me to lie?" He shrugged. "You want to call it lying. I call it protecting your family." I asked what protecting me looked like in this scenario. That's when my mom said something I don't think she even realized was cruel. "You don't need protecting. You're fine. Eric needs this more than you do." There it was. Out loud. Undeniable. I told them I wasn't reversing anything. My dad's face went red. He said if the bank escalated this, there could be consequences. Legal ones. He said my mom was beside herself. He said Eric was devastated. As if any of that outweighed what they'd done. When they realized I wasn't budging, the guilt turned sharper. My mom accused me of tearing the family apart. My dad accused me of being vindictive. They said holidays would be awkward now. That relatives would hear about this. That I was embarrassing them. I asked why embarrassment mattered more than accountability. They didn't answer that either. Eventually, my dad said something that felt less like anger and more like a threat. "If this goes any further, don't expect us to help you in the future." I almost laughed. Help with what? I'd never asked them for financial help. Ever. But the implication was clear. Fall in line, or you're on your own. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying everything. The way they spoke about my money like it was a shared resource. The way Eric hadn't even bothered to show up. The way none of them seemed to grasp that what they'd done was wrong. The next day, Eric finally called me. Not to apologize. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, sounding genuinely confused. "Mom says you're trying to cancel my trip." "I'm not trying to do anything," I said. "I reported unauthorized charges." He scoffed. "It's not unauthorized if we're family." I asked if he'd asked before booking it. He hesitated. I didn't think I had to. There it was again. Assumption. Entitlement. I told him the investigation was out of my hands now. He got quiet, then angry. He said I was jealous. That I couldn't stand seeing him enjoy things. That I'd always resented him. I told him that wasn't true. That what I resented was being used. He hung up on me. Over the next few days, the pressure ramped up. Relatives started texting, asking what was going on. My aunt said my mom was crying nonstop. My cousin hinted that I should be the bigger person. My parents sent long messages alternating between apologies that weren't really apologies and subtle threats about family fallout. Then came the email from the credit card company. They needed additional information, documentation, a formal statement. They also mentioned that due to the amount involved and the international nature of the charges, the case might be escalated beyond an internal review. I read that sentence 3 times. That night, My mom showed up again. Alone this time. She looked tired, but not remorseful. She sat at my table and finally said the quiet part out loud. "If you don't fix this," she said, "Eric could get in real trouble. Is that what you want? To ruin your brother's life over a credit card?" I looked at her and realized she truly believed that the harm flowed in only one direction. I told her I hadn't ruined anything. I told her the truth had a way of doing its own damage. She stood up slowly, eyes hard. "If you go through with this," she said, "don't expect things to ever be the same between us." After she left, I opened my email again. Another message had come in, this one from the bank. They were requesting permission to contact other parties involved in the transactions. Other parties. My phone buzzed almost immediately after. It was a text from Eric. "Mom says if you don't stop this, she's going to tell them everything about you." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, trying to figure out what everything meant, and realized with a sinking feeling that whatever they were about to do next wasn't going to be subtle. The next few weeks were some of the quietest and loudest of my life at the same time. Quiet on the surface, loud in my head. After my mom's last visit, I stopped responding to family messages altogether. Not out of spite, but because every interaction left me feeling hollowed out, like I'd just handed over another piece of myself for inspection and criticism. I muted group chats. I stopped answering calls. I told my aunt, politely, that I needed space and wouldn't be discussing the situation further. That didn't stop her from sending long paragraphs anyway, but at least I didn't read them anymore. The bank investigation moved slowly, methodically, like a machine that didn't care about family dynamics or guilt trips. They asked for written statements. I provided them. They asked for timelines. I laid everything out. Dates, messages, screenshots. It felt surreal, turning my family life into bullet points and attachments, but I also felt something unexpected while doing it. Clarity. For the first time, I wasn't trying to soften the truth. I wasn't explaining it in a way that made everyone else look better. I was just stating facts. Still, the emotional cost hit hard. I stopped sleeping properly. Every night, my brain replayed conversations that hadn't even happened yet. Imagined confrontations. Imagined outcomes. I worried constantly about my credit, my job, my reputation. What if this followed me? What if I really had gone too far, like they said? What if I ended up alone because I couldn't just let things slide like I always had before? There were moments I almost caved. Moments where I'd sit on my couch, phone in hand, hovering over my mom's contact, thinking maybe I should just fix it. Maybe I should say it was a misunderstanding. Maybe I should take the hit, swallow the debt, and move on. But every time I got close to that point, I remembered her words. "You don't need protecting. Eric needs this more than you do." That sentence became a kind of anchor. Not in a good way, but in a grounding way. It reminded me why I was here. Things at work didn't help at first. I was distracted, tired, running on caffeine and adrenaline. I made a small mistake on a report one afternoon, nothing catastrophic, but enough that my manager noticed. He asked me to stay late to fix it, and as I sat alone in the office after everyone else had gone home, staring at numbers that refused to make sense, I felt something break. I put my head in my hands and just sat there. That was probably the lowest point. Not because of the money or the investigation, but because I finally admitted to myself how exhausted I was. Not just from this situation, but from a lifetime of being the one who absorbed impact so others didn't have to. The one who was fine. The one who didn't complain. The one who could handle it. I realized I didn't actually know what it felt like to be taken care of, or even considered. That night, instead of spiraling, I did something small but deliberate. I opened my laptop and started a new document titled, "What I Control." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't motivational. It was practical. I listed things I could actually influence. My finances, my boundaries, my career, my living situation, my mental health. Then I listed things I couldn't. My parents' reactions, Eric's entitlement, extended family opinions, the outcome of the investigation. Seeing it laid out like that shifted something in me. I started tightening my finances immediately. I froze my credit reports with all 3 bureaus. I changed every password I could think of. I removed my parents' access to anything financial, including old emergency contacts and backups I'd never bothered updating. I felt strangely calm while doing it, like I was locking doors that should have been locked years ago. I also booked a few sessions with a therapist. That took more effort than I expected, mostly because part of me still believed I didn't deserve that kind of help. But once I started talking, really talking, things poured out. The favoritism, the resentment I'd never allowed myself to name, the guilt that followed every act of self-preservation. She didn't tell me I was right or wrong. She just helped me see patterns. How often my needs had been minimized. How conditioned I was to equate love with obligation. How unfamiliar discomfort felt when it wasn't my own. Slowly, very slowly, I began to feel steadier. The bank sent another update. The investigation was ongoing. The charges were still under dispute. No final determination yet. I forwarded the email to a folder and stopped checking it obsessively. I decided I'd deal with updates when they came, not hunt for them every hour. Around that time, something unexpected happened at work. My manager called me into his office, and for a split second, my stomach dropped. Old instincts kicked in. Brace yourself. You messed up. But instead, he told me a new project was opening up, one that needed someone detail-oriented and reliable. He said my name had come up, that he trusted me. It wasn't a promotion. Not yet. But it was visibility, opportunity, validation that had nothing to do with my family or what I could provide for them. I took it. Throwing myself into that project gave me structure when everything else felt uncertain. I stayed late because I wanted to, not because I was cleaning up someone else's mess. I felt competent again, capable, like my life wasn't entirely defined by this one crisis. Meanwhile, the silence from my family grew heavier. My mom stopped texting altogether. My dad sent one short message telling me I was being unreasonable and that they were disappointed. Eric blocked me on social media. I found out through a mutual friend that he'd been telling people I'd tried to sabotage him out of jealousy, that I was unstable, that I'd always had issues. Strangely, that hurt less than I thought it would. Maybe because it fit the pattern so perfectly. What did hurt was realizing how conditional their love had been, how quickly it evaporated once I stopped being useful. But there was also relief in that realization. Painful relief, but relief nonetheless. I stopped wondering if I was imagining things. I stopped gaslighting myself. I started rebuilding my life in quiet ways. Cooking proper meals again. Going for walks after work. Reconnecting with friends I'd neglected because I was always busy dealing with family stuff. I told one close friend the whole story, start to finish. He listened without interrupting and then said, "I don't know how you didn't lose it sooner." That meant more than he probably realized. Weeks passed. The investigation dragged on. I lived in a strange in-between state, waiting for a verdict that would affect everything while trying not to let it consume me. I told myself that no matter how it ended, I'd already learned something crucial. I could survive without their approval. Then one afternoon, while I was at work, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my chest tighten. An email from the bank. Subject line, fraud investigation update. Immediate attention required. I didn't open it right away. I finished what I was doing, closed my laptop, and took a deep breath. Whatever was inside that email, I knew it was going to change things again, possibly permanently. As I reached for my phone, it buzzed a second time. This one wasn't from the bank. It was a message request from a number I didn't recognize. The preview showed only one sentence. "This is Detective Harris. I need to speak with you regarding a financial investigation involving your family." I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding, realizing that whatever I'd been rebuilding, whatever fragile piece I'd found, was about to be tested in ways I hadn't fully prepared for. I didn't respond to the detective's message right away. Not because I was scared exactly, more because I'd learned, slowly, painfully, that reacting immediately was how I used to lose control of situations. I'd spent most of my life responding, adjusting, smoothing things over. This time, I wanted to be deliberate. I forwarded the message to my personal email, locked my phone, and finished my workday on autopilot. Numbers went into cells. Emails got answered. I smiled at coworkers when needed. Inside, though, something was settling into place. Not rage. Not panic. Resolve. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table again, the same place where this whole thing had started weeks earlier. But the feeling was different now. Back then, I'd felt cornered. Now I felt prepared. I called the number Detective Harris had used. He answered on the second ring, calm and professional. He confirmed my identity, then explained that because of the amount involved and the dispute outcome trending toward confirmed fraud, law enforcement had been notified. He said they were looking into who had initiated the transactions, who had benefited from them. and whether there was intent. He was careful with his words. Neutral. Factual. I asked him what he needed from me. Mostly cooperation, he said. And documentation. Any communication that shows you didn't authorize the charges. I told him I had plenty. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. After the call ended, I opened the bank email I'd been avoiding. It confirmed what the detective had implied. The investigation had concluded that the charges were unauthorized. The provisional credit was now permanent. The account would remain closed, and the case had been escalated externally. In plain language, the bank believed me. I sat there for a long time after reading that. No triumphant feeling. No rush. Just a deep, steady sense of validation. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't overreacted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was real. And for the first time since everything began, I stopped thinking in terms of defense and started thinking in terms of positioning. I didn't want chaos. I didn't want public meltdowns or screaming matches or dramatic showdowns. I didn't want to win by destroying anyone. What I wanted was something simpler and more precise. I wanted the truth to land exactly where it belonged. Over the next few days, I became very organized. I printed out everything. Bank statements, emails, text messages, screenshots of Eric's itinerary, including the timestamps showing when bookings were made and from which IP addresses. I labeled folders. I made timelines. Not emotionally charged ones. Clean ones. Clinical ones. I also started making calls. Not confrontational calls. Informational ones. I spoke to a consumer rights advisor through a free legal clinic. I didn't ask how to punish my parents. I asked how to protect myself. What my obligations were. What I should and shouldn't say. What kind of exposure I might have if this escalated further. I spoke to HR at work. Not about details, just enough to explain that I was dealing with a personal legal matter that might involve phone calls during business hours. They were understanding. More than understanding, actually. Supportive. Each small step added another layer of insulation between me and the chaos my family was generating. The silence from them continued. No apologies. No explanations. Just absence. I later found out through my aunt that my parents had told relatives a very different version of events. That I'd panicked. That I'd misunderstood. That I was stubbornly refusing to correct an honest mistake. What they didn't realize was that their version only worked as long as I stayed quiet. And I was done staying quiet. The detective meeting happened on a Tuesday morning. I took a half-day off work and met him at a small office downtown. He was polite, direct, and thorough. He asked me to walk through everything from the beginning. I did. I didn't editorialize. I didn't speculate. I just described. When I finished, he leaned back slightly and said, "You understand that if we proceed, this could have serious consequences for the people involved." I nodded. "I understand. What's your goal here?" he asked. Not accusatory. Curious. I thought about it carefully before answering. "I want to stop being treated like collateral damage." He studied me for a moment, then nodded as if that made perfect sense. After that meeting, something shifted again. Not outwardly. Inwardly. I stopped bracing myself for retaliation and started anticipating outcomes. I knew my parents. I knew Eric. They wouldn't accept accountability quietly. If backed into a corner, they'd look for leverage. They'd look for pressure points. So I removed them. I changed my phone number and gave the new one only to people I trusted. I updated my address with banks and employers and removed my parents as emergency contacts everywhere. I packed up a few things they'd stored at my place and dropped them off at a mutual friend's house instead of returning them directly. I also did something that felt strange but necessary. I wrote a letter. Not to send. Not yet. Just to get everything straight in my own head. I wrote down every instance I could remember where I'd been expected to give more because I was stronger. Every time Eric's needs had come first. Every time my discomfort had been reframed as selfishness. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't exaggerate. I just documented. By the end, I wasn't angry. I was clear. That clarity became my biggest advantage. The first crack appeared sooner than I expected. My dad called from an unknown number. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. His tone was different now. Less authoritative. Tighter. He said they'd been contacted. That things were getting out of hand. That lawyers were expensive. That I needed to think about what this would do to the family. I saved the voicemail. Then my mom emailed. A long one. Emotional. Oscillating between guilt and fear. She said she hadn't realized the bank would take it this far. She said Eric was stressed. She said people were asking questions. She said maybe we could all sit down and talk like adults. I noticed what she didn't say. She didn't say sorry. Eric tried a different angle. He messaged me through a mutual friend's account. Said he felt betrayed. Said brothers shouldn't do this to each other. Said I could have just asked him to pay me back. That one almost made me laugh. Because now I knew something he didn't. The bookings hadn't just been for flights and hotels. There were non-refundable deposits, insurance claims, vendor contracts, the kind of things that unraveled badly once fraud was confirmed. I didn't respond. Instead, I waited. I continued cooperating fully with the investigation. I let professionals do what they were trained to do. I stayed calm, factual, unreachable. And slowly, predictably, the power dynamic flipped. They needed me now. My silence, my cooperation, my willingness to say, it's fine. I gave them none of it. One evening, as I was making dinner, my phone buzzed with another email from the detective. Short, direct. They've provided their statements. There are inconsistencies. We may need you present for a joint clarification. I read it twice, then set my phone down and turned back to the stove, stirring absent-mindedly. A joint clarification meant questions, side-by-side comparisons, timelines intersecting. It meant the story they'd been telling each other, and themselves, was about to collide with documented reality. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think about what came next. Not emotionally, strategically, because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing my moment, and it was getting closer. The joint clarification happened on a Thursday morning. I arrived early, sat in a quiet conference room, and waited. I wasn't nervous. That surprised me. Months ago, even the thought of being in the same room as my parents while authority figures were present would have sent my stomach into knots. But by then, something fundamental had changed. I wasn't there to explain myself. I wasn't there to convince anyone of my feelings. I was there because the facts were already on my side. When my parents walked in, they looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. My mom avoided my eyes. My dad tried to project confidence, but his jaw kept tightening and loosening like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite swallow. Eric came in last, visibly irritated, scrolling on his phone as if this were an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. The detective and a bank investigator led the meeting. They laid out the timeline on a screen. Dates, times, IP addresses, authorizations requested and approved. My credit limit increase. The bookings made minutes later. Screenshots of confirmation emails sent to my parents' address. Eric's name on the tickets. All of it, clean and unemotional. Then they asked my parents to explain. My dad spoke first. He framed it as a misunderstanding. He said they believed they had implied consent. He said family finances were often fluid. He said he hadn't thought it would be taken this way. The investigator asked if there was any written consent. There wasn't. My mom spoke next. She cried. She said she was under stress. That she'd only wanted to do something nice for her son. That she'd assumed I'd understand. That I was always so capable. The detective nodded, took notes, and asked a simple question. Did you ask him? Silence. Eric shifted in his chair and jumped in. He said he didn't know which card was used. That he trusted our parents. That he'd assumed they had handled it. That he'd already told people about the trip and didn't want to look foolish. The investigator asked if he'd benefited from the purchases. Yes, Eric said, irritated. Obviously, the room went quiet. That was the moment I realized I didn't need to say much at all. Every time they spoke, they dug the hole deeper. Their stories didn't align. Timelines contradicted each other. Intent became harder to deny with every answer. Eventually, the detective turned to me. Is there anything you'd like to add? I took a breath. Just one thing. I never gave permission. Not verbally. Not in writing. And when I discovered the charges, I reported them because I was advised to protect myself. That was it. No speeches. No accusations. No emotional appeals. The meeting ended shortly after. The detective explained the next steps. Charges would be determined by the prosecutor's office. Restitution discussions would follow. He emphasized that while cooperation could be considered, the facts were the facts. When my parents stood up to leave, my mom finally looked at me. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was stunned, like she'd just realized the world didn't rearrange itself around her expectations. Eric didn't look at me at all. The fallout wasn't immediate. It unfolded in stages, each one quieter than the last. The trip, obviously, never happened. Vendors canceled. Deposits were forfeited. Travel insurance denied claims once fraud was confirmed. The money didn't magically reappear somewhere else. It vanished, along with the fantasy they'd built around it. Then came the legal consequences. I won't go into every detail, but I'll say this. When institutions stop listening to family excuses and start listening to evidence, things move quickly. My parents were forced to confront a reality they'd avoided for decades. That intent doesn't disappear just because you say family enough times. Eric faced consequences too. Not prison, not dramatic courtroom scenes, but something that hit him harder in the long run. The story he'd been telling about himself, that he was unlucky, misunderstood, held back by others, collapsed under scrutiny. People asked questions. Employers asked questions. The version of events he'd casually spread couldn't survive contact with documentation. And then there was the social fallout. Family gatherings stopped including me, not because I was excluded, but because no one knew how to talk about what happened without acknowledging uncomfortable truths. Some relatives reached out privately to apologize for pressuring me earlier. Others stayed silent. A few doubled down and said I should have handled it internally. I didn't argue with them. I didn't need to, because my life, quietly, started getting better. My credit recovered faster than expected. My finances stabilized. The project at work turned into a promotion, a real one, with a raise that made future plans feel possible instead of theoretical. I moved to a new apartment. Not flashy, just peaceful, somewhere that felt like mine. I kept going to therapy. I learned how to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it for someone else. I learned that boundaries don't require justification. That being calm doesn't mean being passive. That walking away can be an act of strength, not weakness. My parents tried to reconnect months later. Carefully worded messages. Invitations framed as olive branches. They still never apologized for what they'd done. Not directly. They spoke in generalities. About mistakes. About moving forward. I declined. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. I understood something then that I wish I'd understood earlier in life. You don't owe access to people who only value you when you're useful. You don't have to sacrifice your future to preserve someone else's illusion of harmony. The revenge, if you can call it that, wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve shouting or public humiliation. It was letting the truth stand on its own. It was choosing myself for the first time and discovering that the world didn't end when I did. The last message I ever received from my dad said, "I hope this was worth it." I never replied, because the answer was already obvious. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying someone else's debt, financial or emotional. And that freedom cost me a family that never really had my back to begin with.